The shocking truth about the carnivore diet that you need to know.
What is the shocking truth about the carnivore diet? I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and thanks for sending a video for me to comment on and react to. This one is the shocking truth about the carnivore diet you need to know by Dr. Stephen Gundry. If you don't have my top 10 tips on how to start keto the right way, look in the description below. Now, Dr. Gundry has the Dr. Gundry podcast. Dr. Gundry is a cardiothoracic surgeon turned dietitian, influencer and health expert in many different things, including the keto diet and whether you should take berberine and all these other anyway, there's a lot of videos that Dr. Gundry has done. And I'm particularly interested in the carnivore diet, as you probably are too. So let's see what Dr. Gundry has to say.
The shocking truth about the carnivore diet that you need to know. Now, let's be clear. I have nothing against a carnivore diet as an elimination diet. In fact, some of my patients use it on a short-term basis to break a cycle of gut inflammation and leaky gut. And it does support their gut health.
So an elimination diet is a diet that eliminates possible offenders that are causing some sort of health problem. So a classic elimination diet is a gluten-free diet. If you've been told that you have a problem with gluten, it can lead to a disease called celiac disease, then you may have been told to follow a gluten-free diet. That would be a type of elimination diet. There's another diet called the FODMAP diet, which is a simple sugar elimination diet. It's been studied in the context or as a treatment for ulcerative colitis and other bowel issues. And if you're suffering from a migraine, you might be told to have an elimination diet that eliminates the additives, preservatives, artificial dyes, that sort of thing. And so a carnivore diet is sort of the granddaddy of elimination diets because it's eliminating gluten. You're not having bread or pasta or the gluten. You're not having the simple sugars. So it's also a FODMAP restricting diet. It depending on how you do it, it's eliminating also the preservatives and artificial dyes. So a carnivore diet, depending how you do it, is sort of the granddaddy of elimination diets.
Because it removes all lectin-containing compounds from the diet. And let's be clear, plants do not want you to eat them.
Now, I've heard people, please, Dr. Gundry, do you know what plants want and what they don't want? Again, being very careful with language. Although I have to say, it was a bit persuasive for me in the sort of big picture view that plants can't run away. So that, mammals, we can run, and one of our defense mechanisms is to run, to get away from a predator. So the argument is that plants put chemicals and neurotoxins in their leaves so that when mammals eat them, then they get repulsed and they don't eat the plant. For example, if you ate a pepper or a leafy green that caused you to break out in hives in your mouth, you would tend not to go back and eat it again. Well, humans eat peppers and things like that. It's not normal. Mammals don't do that. So the argument that plants put things in their leaves to repel the mammal, I kind of think that sort of makes sense. And of course, the fruit generally is made to be sweet, so that animals eat the fruit and then they spread the seeds of the tree or the plant other places. But again, how do we know plants don't want us to eat them? Well, okay, he's being a little loose with the language, a little anthropomorphication here.
Even so-called friendly plants that appear on the plant paradox diet. But in some people, their gut is so damaged that even the defense compounds of simple plants, like romaine lettuce or broccoli is enough to cause damage to people's health. I'll give you a famous example that I've talked about before. Years ago, we got a NutriBullet blender, and my wife decided to make a kale smoothie. Why not? Kale's great for you. She blended the kale smoothie, and I drank it on the way to work. And about an hour later, I was in the bathroom with blowout diarrhea.
Oh, I thought he was going to talk about a study, but it was his own personal experience. Well, that's all well and good, but is that really data saying that kale is bad for you? I personally don't like kale, but anyway, that one anecdote, and especially the influencer's anecdote, I'd like to know more than that, wouldn't you?
What the heck happened? Well, I can tolerate kale, which is bitter, which has a lot of plant defense compounds, more bitter, more better, when I eat it whole or cooked and it's digested slowly. But when we take raw kale and pulverize it, all of a sudden, all of those potentially mischievous compounds were hitting my gut wall, and my gut said, holy cow, we got to get rid of this stuff. And quite frankly, I haven't had a kale smoothie since.
Well, good. Yeah, that's the classic. Doc, it hurts when I go like this. Well, then don't do that, if it's an awkward thing to do. Well, so the leaky gut idea is, I think, a pretty good rationale or explanation for what's happening with autoimmunity. And although a lot of the mainstream medical world still doesn't really accept that because of I don't know why, actually, but certainly changing the diet can improve the leaky gut. On a real food keto diet that I teach people, the gut microbiome changes for sure. And kind of like this, you add in lots of plants, then you're not going to be able to process them. If that's leaky gut or not, I'm not sure about that. But the idea that you can have an elimination diet, do great, and then add in something. I've learned that many people are sensitive to certain foods that don't quite make sense to me, but you're going to be the one who is living in your body and will know your body's response better than anyone else. In fact, one of my patients I lost track of for a while, and she said that eating certain foods hurt. Eating plants hurt her stomach, and no one really could process what that meant. But when she got rid of the plant foods and went more on a carnivore type diet, the pain after eating went away, and it normalized her entire bodily function. And this was someone who was really seriously ill. So I'm open to the idea of this elimination diet like Dr. Gundry is.
Some of my patients are so sensitive to these plant compounds that I have them with irritable bowel or leaky gut nuke their vegetables, cook them forever, pressure cook them to destroy these compounds. But even that, in some people, is not enough. And we've seen success by eliminating all of these compounds. In fact, I've written before that a lot of these diets, like the Atkins diet, like the drinking man's diet, which was a very low carbohydrate diet, basically eliminated these plant compounds, and that's one of the reasons they work for so many people. So maybe I was the father of the carnivore diet, as some people have accused me. But before we say, well, if plants are so bad for you, all of us should be eating a carnivore diet, not so fast.
Well, I'm not sure anyone can take credit for being the father of a carnivore diet. It's been around a long time, almost all of human history. But anyway, I agree, elimination, and I'm not sure where he's going, because if everything is looking good, you're feeling well, the doctor is measuring what a doctor measures, and some of the blood tests might look a little different, but those aren't big ticket items to be concerned about. Why wouldn't you continue on a diet that has been so corrective, I wonder?
First of all, there's absolutely zero evidence of long-living people eating a carnivore diet. A society that follows a carnivore diet does not exist.
Well, so this is where the low-carb world pulls out the Inuit, the people who lived in the polar areas of the world, the Arctic, and it was too cold, really, for plants to grow. The Inuit and then the Maasai are a group that not only eat meat but they drink milk and drink the blood of the cow. Although these groups now eat westernized foods, it's hard to study them, but that's interesting. There actually were two populations that lived for thousands and thousands of years that did not eat many plants. I don't know why Dr. Gundry didn't mention those.
And one would think with so much experimentation with food around the world for millennia, if a carnivore diet was as good as its proponents say it is for long-term health, surely we should have been able to find a society that has long-term great health on a carnivore diet. And that simply does not exist. In fact, looking at areas of the world that have extreme longevity, the blue zones and other zones that I've talked about in my book, all of these areas have one thing in common. And no, it's not that they eat beans and rice or grains. Sorry, that's absolutely not true. All of these areas, in general, eat a very low animal protein diet. And as I've written about in all my books, that's what appears to be the major driver of this longevity.
Well, that's conjecture, really, right?
Now, the other thing, if you're going to embark on a carnivore diet, let's be careful about our food choices that are available by eating animal products. First of all, there is a sugar molecule in beef, lamb, and pork called nu-5GC. That sugar molecule is distinctly different from the sugar molecule that lines the blood vessels of chicken, fish, and us. We have an antibody that can be developed when we're exposed to nu-5GC containing foods that we will attack our own blood vessels with that antibody. So we don't want an autoimmune attack on our blood vessels. And there is considerable experimental evidence that one of the reasons that red meat promotes heart disease is actually from this molecule nu-5GC prompting an autoimmune attack on our blood vessels.
Now, I'm familiar with lots of theories about how red meat causes these problems. In fact, there have been so many studies trying to implicate red meat to cause all of human illness that very small changes can be amplified into big, like the red meat and cohort studies, observational cohort studies. It's not hypothesis testing, it's hypothesis generating. So that doesn't persuade me to look at a mechanism that if people who promote plant-based diets are trying to find the reason you shouldn't eat red meat. And they've studied over and over and over these different molecules, and it's the sum total of the metabolism that we're really taking advantage of. The idea that let's just balance, let's say you're eliminating this elimination diet, all these bad things, and now you have this little thing from the red meat. How do you balance the potency of these two different things? You really can't. So that doesn't persuade me. So
the other thing that's concerning is that tumor cells can use nu-5GC to hide from our immune system, to cloak themselves. Now here's the deal. You and I do not produce new 5GC. So the only place a tumor cell could get new 5GC is for you to eat it in beef, lamb, or pork. And that's why there is an association. Now just remember, association does not mean causation, but there is an association between red meat eating and cancer, particularly colon cancer and even breast cancer. So,
yeah, I'll respectfully disagree with that.
Our species became completely different. One of the reasons we think is because of this new AC mutation. Okay, so you're not going to eat beef, lamb, and pork. That's pretty easy. I'll eat chicken instead. That has new 5AC. Well, not so fast. First of all, most commercially available chicken is incredibly high in lectins and antibiotics. Now, wait a minute. Lectins, I thought lectins were in plants, and that's true. Lectins are primarily in plant foods. Well, you've heard the phrase, you are what you eat. But more importantly, you are what the thing you're eating ate. So if you feed chickens lectin-containing foods like corn and soybeans, which is what most chicken feed is made of, the lectins in those corn and soybeans will become part of the chicken meat. And it's always amazing to me when I have people with tough autoimmune diseases that we take away their organic free-range chicken and their autoimmune disease finally abates. And it's because those organic free-range chickens were being fed organic corn and soybeans. So what can you do?
Hang on, I just can't. I want to study. I want prospective studies showing that these things are changed, and that was the cause before signing off on that one.
Try to find pastured chickens, but even that is troublesome.
Well, so now I'm getting into the fear mongering of, well, what do I eat then? In fact, there was a presenter at a meeting that I went to who said, this causes inflammation, that causes inflammation, that causes inflammation. And so basically he says, I'm just going to fast and not eat anything because that's so anti-inflammatory, when that's ridiculous, because you need to eat to support your body. Protein comes first. And anyway, so I'm beginning to think this is more about fear-mongering, and I'm not really following this as a scientific sort of argument.
As you know, we've had Farmer Dan from lectinlightchicken.com on this podcast, and Farmer Dan from Texas has perfected lectin-free chickens using lectin-free feed in his pastured chickens. And I'm a huge fan of his. Why else? Well, even though it is technically illegal now to give antibiotics to chickens, there's a catch. Chickens can be kept in a warehouse with 100,000 chickens. And they're not in cages. They actually hold themselves up by being crammed in there. Legally, you can keep those chickens in that warehouse as long as you open a door to the outside for 5 minutes every 24 hours. And the chicken has, in theory, the ability to go outside. And that actually is the definition of free-range chicken. The law, which was passed in 2007, actually allows you to feed chickens regular grain, not organic, if the price of organic food goes twice as high as regular. You can switch the chickens to regular food and still label it organic because you meant well. Now, even though it is illegal to feed chickens antibiotics, if the veterinarian, who of course is paid for by the chicken company, thinks that one of those chickens in 100,000 chickens is sick, you're allowed to give the entire flock antibiotics to treat that one sick chicken. In fact, looking at chickens who have supposedly never been given antibiotics, in some studies, 60% of those chickens have antibiotics in their flesh, even though it's illegal to give them antibiotics, certified as antibiotic-free.
So this is a bit of a sidebar, but I guess you don't want to have red meat because it has this molecule that you develop autoimmunity to. You don't want to have chickens because they have antibiotics. Actually, in the program that I've run, maybe we're talking a different language because Dr. Gundry is talking about the perfect diet that for all, like the tablets coming down from Moses, that if you could have organic, organic doesn't really mean organic. What is the average person going to do? So in the clinic that I run, I've never talked about having organic foods. I couldn't because most of the people in Durham, North Carolina can't afford to have that sort of food. In fact, Dr. Gundry would probably be, falling out of his chair if he learned that I helped someone lose 100 pounds just eating at McDonald's, because that's where the person would get his food. So I'm just not persuaded that these are any serious conditions. Plus, remember, you're not eating all of if you choose to do a carnivore diet, it's an elimination diet of all those other things. But whether you can actually have a perfect diet, I don't know. Let's keep listening.
There are interesting studies showing that urinary tract infections in women can be directly traced to contaminated chicken meat. Antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria in chicken can lead to foodborne illness. Almost once a month, we hear of a chicken-related foodborne illness. About 1 in 6 salmonella infections and 1 in 3 campylobacter infections are due to antibiotic-resistant strains of those bacteria in the chicken you're eating.
Well, I think this is a problem of any food, isn't it? It's scaling it up, and the only way to get around that is to grow your own. I know from time to time vegetables are a cause of foodborne illness too. I don't follow that this is different than any other type of food here.
Be very careful when it says no antibiotics label. That is not your assurance that these chickens have not been given antibiotics. Look for pasture-raised chicken. Know your farmer. Ask your farmer at the farmer's market, what do you feed your chickens? The correct answer is nothing. They go out in the fields and eat bugs and grass, which is what they're supposed to do. Okay, well, what about eggs? That could be a potential for the carnivore diet. Well, if you're going to do that, again, look for pasture-raised or at least omega-3 eggs, and preferably look for omega-3 eggs that have been fed algae. There are a number on the market. But the deal with eggs, in my humble opinion, is eggs should be a vehicle to get olive oil into your mouth. And interestingly enough, eat primarily the yolks. That's where all the good stuff is. And look for the really bright, intensely orange-colored yolks. That's a guarantee, pretty much, that those chickens have been outside eating bugs. Give the whites to your dog. Your dog will love you for it. Interestingly enough, about 2.5 eggs a day meet all the protein requirements for your needs.
I agree with the eggs being a great food, and I think it's fine if you have the albumin too, the egg whites, but I'm not so concerned about the omega-3, omega-6 ratio here in the eggs because you've eliminated, it's an elimination diet. You've eliminated the source of most omega-6s that are coming in highly processed foods. So it's curious that these are just kind of refining arguments within the context of an elimination diet that so far I think that carnivores have eliminated all these other things. You're going to be better off despite these critiques so far.
How about fish? Please eat wild fish only, preferably smaller fish like sardines, like mullet. The best seafoods that you can get, wild-caught salmon. Alaska salmon by law has to be wild-caught. If you see the words organic salmon, run the other way. They didn't follow the salmon around in the ocean to see if they were eating organically. Those are farm-raised salmon that have been fed organic corn and soybeans. So just because it says organic or Nordic salmon or Scottish organic salmon or Canadian salmon, run the other way. That's not what you're looking for.
Well, gosh, I don't want to have to worry about all of these little details. I prefer a more simple approach. I'm still waiting to see the incremental benefit. Where's the evidence that I get to live longer, happier, healthier by worrying about this all day long? That it seems I have to worry.
Try to stay away from larger fish. The people that I see with high mercury levels in their urine or their blood, in my practice, are dentists or sushi eaters. These are not your friends. Swordfish, tilefish, grouper has high levels of mercury, and try to avoid these things. And naturally, if you're having fish and chips or fried calamari, that's not part of the carnivore diet. Sorry about that. Okay, so why do people get good results with the carnivore diet? Well, it's because you're eliminating lectins. But all of my carnivore diet patients, when we look at their inflammatory markers, over time, their inflammatory markers of vessel flexibility, begin to get worse and worse. So short term, to fix a problem with an affront of plant compounds against your gut, I've got nothing wrong with that. But long term, I can tell you in my patient population, it looks like a recipe for disaster. And again, if this was such a good idea, we should be able to find a society with incredibly long-lived, healthy people who have adopted a carnivore diet. And I'm sorry, they just can't be found.
There are a couple of things in there. There are some populations that have almost had a carnivore-like diet, and then the native populations who are maybe almost carnivore live a long time. And the other interesting thing is, you said a recipe for disaster because of the blood markers not looking right. Well, we're seeing in the low carb world and the carnivore world, blood markers not really representing or meaning the same thing. And it's going to be fascinating to see how reading the tea leaves of the blood pans out to outcome studies. And I'm not I'm not afraid of the blood markers anymore. I'm not afraid of an elevated LDL. Certainly, you're not on the edge of a cliff, and it's not dangerous. There are studies going on to see what does that really mean. So I'm a little perturbed that, okay, he was onto it, now he's not onto it because of blood tests.
Finally, just remember, as in general, and I agree with Dr. Walter Longo with this, the less animal protein that you can get, the better.
Walter Longo, I'll do another video on him sometime. It comes from the plant-based world, and I don't even know that he understands anything other than a plant-based sort of view of the world. And the idea that you get fasting results when you're fat burning on a low-carb diet wouldn't cross his mind. I've met with him a few times, crossed paths at meetings, and so again here, I think Dr. Gundry is trying to intercalate and be relevant in a world of other sorts of science that sometimes is really biased.
And when I ask my patients to reduce animal protein, I see dramatic reductions in a blood marker called insulin-like growth factor. And as a general rule, the lower your insulin-like growth factor, the longer you live well, and quite frankly, the less chance of cancer developing. So why not go after that?
Again, that's apples and oranges in the context of a metabolism that's entirely different. A keto metabolism. Oh, by the way, a carnivore diet is a subset of a low-carbohydrate keto diet that we've been studying and using at Duke University now studying for over 20 years. So it's not some bizarre construct that's outside the scientific realm of reality. That it is a low-carb and a keto type of diet, just one that's super low on the vegetable and plant matter.
So is a carnivore diet a great idea? Well, as the ultimate elimination diet, I have nothing wrong with a carnivore diet in the short term. But once you fix the underlying problem, and you know how to do that if you've been watching this podcast, once you fix that problem, it's time to wean yourself from the carnivore diet. And if you're going to do the carnivore diet, please try to think about small fish, try to think about shellfish, like clams, like scallops, like oysters, like mussels, and small fish like sardines. That's the safest way to practice a carnivore diet.
Well, I have to say, I'm not so dogmatic. I'm not so sure about those conclusions. I'm still open-minded, I suppose, and learning that the blood levels of these different things really are not comparable because of a different metabolic state called nutritional ketosis. I guess I'm a little more optimistic than Dr. Gundry about this. I'd love to see some studies on the carnivore diet, some randomized trials comparing the carnivore diet to other types of healthy diets so that you can have comparisons. In the short run, until those studies are done, you want to follow everything that a doctor can measure. I go directly to the vasculature to measure the carotids, the coronaries, and the aorta as best you can, rather than reading the blood levels anymore, just because, remember, cholesterol is not a disease. The elevated IGF is not a disease. We're trying to prevent the cardiovascular disease and cancer as a result of those things. So interesting. Dr. Gundry has lots of ideas that seem to be a little bit fear-mongering to me, but interesting nonetheless. I hope that's helpful, and if you like it, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on further videos. Ring the notification bell, and if you don't have my top 10 tips on how to start keto right, please look in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.